It's October, so it's time to paint an autumnal scene together. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. After all the art chats and more theoretical videos of the last couple of weeks, I wanted to do something more practical for this time and bring back those paint with me videos. For those of you who watched my last 5 tips of how to stay inspired, you remember that I've talked about how working seasonally and leaning into those changes that nature presents us with really helped me get the variety that I need to stay inspired. And today is going to be one of those examples because we are going to paint an autumnal scene together. A couple of weeks ago, I came across a photograph that was published by one of the content creators that I follow on Instagram. Her account is called Adventuring Beth, and I'm going to leave the link in the description for those of you who might be interested in her work. I really admire her. I do love everything that she puts out there. She has this capacity of capturing the autumnal, melancholic and romantic mood in every photo that she takes, be it her own self-portrait or, I don't know, shots of a cabin in the woods that she's staying at. It's really beautiful what she does. I followed her for over 5 years, I believe, and I've seen that she has launched a YouTube channel as well a couple of years ago, but I believe she doesn't post regularly on there. But anyway, if you like her aesthetics, I will leave the link to her YouTube account as well. So I was strolling through her recent photographs and I saw that she republished a shot that she published maybe a year ago already and that I absolutely loved. And I remember saying to myself that I absolutely wanted to take this as an inspiration to paint something like that a year ago, and then actually I never came around doing it. Life got in the way, and then I saw it again a couple of weeks ago and I was like, okay, this time I will definitely paint it, and I know exactly what to do with this painting because I wanted to film it for you guys. It might be interesting for you to see how I proceed, where I find my inspirations, but also I think it's very fitting for the season. It is coherent with what I said in my last video about how to work seasonally. This is exactly the type of thing that I do in order to mix things up for me. So when I saw this shot, I immediately thought of a modern version of a Vermeer, because you have the window, you have these beautiful chiaroscuro going on. You have a typical scene of an everyday life with a girl doing something completely ordinary, but it looks so incredibly poetic and romantic that I think the photo already looks like a painting, so it shouldn't be that difficult to make it painterly if you want to. As you can see, I've already started. I didn't film the preparation process and the underpainting because I honestly think that it's not the most interesting part of the process. I also think that there are a ton of videos out there on how to do an underpainting correctly. So I wanted to bring you in now when it gets more interesting, in my personal opinion. I have used a wood panel for this because I really wanted to lean as much into the Vermeer style as possible. And as you can see, I've already blocked in the areas that are going to be the most dark ones in the painting. I have rubbed off the areas of highlight. I think I got the proportions right, so now the real fun can begin. Right, when I look more attentively at the photograph, I see 3 difficulties that we are going to cope with when transforming this photograph into a painting. The first one is the management of colors. Of course, values are pretty much what they already are in the photograph, so this is not the hardest part of it, I suppose. I think what will prove difficult is how to show that while you have this brownish, stylized feel to it, it is not a black and white photograph, or it's not a sienna type of painting where you only have browns, whites and the shades in between, but you still have the colors. So I think we might want to amp up the colors in the garden that you see through the window a little bit, but also be careful as to introducing some colors within the interior. This is how it's going to feel painterly but also realistic at the same time. The second challenge will be the management of the details within the shadows, because we obviously want to avoid giving the feeling that the painting is not well crafted, that there is no detail in the shadows and that we just leave everything that we don't see really clearly in the shadow and that's it. No, if you want to have this illusion of realism, you have to still pay attention to the details that lie within the shadow, and the tonal differences won't be as present as they would be in plain daylight, but your eye must be able to detect them still and have the feeling that there is something in the shadow and that the curtains still continue to have a pattern even when they are at their darkest point. So this is what we are going to be mindful of here. And then finally, the third challenge for me will be the window, because as you can see, and this is also what makes the shot so genius in my eyes, is that you have the traces of condensation on the window. At some places you really can perceive the garden very well. At other places it's blurred. So these variations will ask for a lot of effort. Otherwise, if it's not well done, I think that you might have a hard time understanding what you're looking at, because it would just appear blotchy, and this is obviously not what we want. We want the viewer to understand that sometimes you can look through really well, and at some places there are these little droplets of condensation that are sitting on the glass directly and are blurring your vision. So this is not going to be simple, I suppose, but if it were simple, everybody could do it, right? So this will be a nice challenge here to do, and a really beautiful autumnal scene. Now, without further ado, let's get painting. Obviously, this level of detail is more appropriate for a study, and this is really what I wanted it to be. If I were to finish this up to a level that would be online for sale afterwards, I would need to spend about, I would say, at least a week more on this painting to finish everything up and to really polish the different finishes, layering things up even more in order to create more depth. So this for me is a very appropriate study where everything is where it needed to go. We have the color values down to what they should be, details in the shadow as I stated in my introduction, and I think on the whole a good idea of the potential that this painting could become once finished. As to the 3 challenges that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, which were management of color, the management of condensation on the window, as well as a realistic representation of details in the shadow, I would maintain that these were, well, the aspects within the process that I struggled most with, or that presented the most of challenge and had me, kept me on my toes. The color, I feel like I found a good base palette that worked, mixed together, complemented each other. We had some cooler shades, some really bright, warm shades, and a ground in between. So what I used was, let me think, green umber for those deeper greens within the window, brown ochre, I believe, a cool grey and a warm grey. Then I had some classic ochre mixed in as well in order to highlight some really bright leaves in the garden. Actually, to be really accurate, I pulled out the boxes. Where was it? So, as I stated, Italian green umber for those deeper grey tones within the window. Then warm grey for the highlights. Where is the rest of it? No, this we actually did not use. Come on. Brown ochre. Yeah, brown ochre, as I stated, for the middle ground. This got mixed up here in between. And obviously I didn't get the box with the greens, with the blues, sorry, and it is the blue-gray, I'm pretty sure about it. So color-wise, it was maybe less of a challenge than what I was afraid it was going to be. The condensation one was a trickier bit, I must say, especially because we are still at a level of a study, so all the color layers are not entirely dried down. I'm not following the classical process here with having some time set apart in order to let the color sit and dry down a little bit in order to build it up best. So at some points when I used some more texture brushes, I ended up lifting the previous layer off, and it's true that the wood panel is really not forgiving in that way at all. So for demonstration purposes, this was maybe not the best choice, but it is what it is. I'm just saying that if I were to finish this correctly, I would definitely pass over the parts where you see the condensation in this kind of white layer of droplets on the window, and continue using the brush I had. This worked out really well, I felt. It's this one. It's a Raphael Textura synthetic, super heavy body paint, and I think it's because it's mostly old and battered and it's really textured, so I don't have a smooth brush stroke with this one, and whenever I touch it and not use medium, but mostly load the brush up with paint, it gets pretty textured and does this frosting kind of on the window, and I think it worked well for this kind of purposes when you have to blur it out, but in a textured way and not in a smooth way like we would have wanted for, let's say, painting clouds, right? So this was tricky, but it was all right. And then the third challenge was the detail in the darker parts, in the shadows of the curtain. I must say what was difficult here was my camera setup. I didn't want to, you know, cover up too much of the space in front of the canvas so that you can still see what I'm doing. So I had my arm like so, and the lines didn't end up very neat, the lines that I needed to go in the curtains. So this was a little bit messy, and as I stated previously, the paint wasn't entirely dry down, so it was good in a way, because you need, for these kind of highlights that are a bit peeking through the shadows, you need the paint to not be dry, so that the colors could mix a little bit within the process. But I would wish them to be a little drier than that, because I ended up having mixed paint on the brush really quickly. So once again, if it was not for demonstration purposes, but if I was to be working on it seriously in order to sell this painting, I definitely would have taken more time to let it sit and yeah, get to a level of detail and variation within the highlights in the shadows that I wanted, because I think what we could still do better let me see, in this part is that the light hits some details in the curtain on top and then kind of falls into the shadow progressively. And I think what would make it even more realistic is if we had some details be really highlighted, really bright, and then gradually falling more and more into the shadow. But to do this, once again, I needed to have drier paint than I had to layer up the brighter colors. Otherwise, we at this point had something that was fairly, you know, mixing on the go, and you cannot have a very bright pure color if you're at this stage. But on the whole, I must say I am, well, positively surprised that it worked out this well, and that I got fairly quickly to a point where I think we have a study that one doesn't need to be ashamed of, let's say. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful and entertaining. As always, if you are not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please consider doing it. If you are, thank you very much. And I hope, as always, to see you in my next video. Until then, have a very pleasant morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Cheers!